it's amazing to me what's happened in the productivity enhancements we've had as a result of technology. And yet we still have, poverty and wealth inequality. And I mean, we all should be working 20-hour work weeks because we've got so many more efficient ways of doing things. Now, part of that's because, work expands to, fill the time allotted. But it's also part of it's because the monetary system is stolen from us. And all that productivity benefit has gone up to the top 1%. That's kind of just raked it off, and so they're richer than Croesus, and the rest of us are just kind of working away. So yeah, I mean, I'm with Jeff. I mean, it's a broken system, and trying to run a monetary system that by definition requires inflation, which is what Keynes' system does, as an overlay to a technology world where everything is getting relentlessly cheaper and faster. It just doesn't work. I mean, something's got to give, and it's not going to be the technology. We keep inventing better and better technical solutions. So the monetary system is just going to have to blow up, and the book kind of says that. And by the way, that's a little bit scary to some people, and it's not necessarily something people want to contemplate, but it just is what it is. And so another part of the book, and the reason I wrote it was just to try and kind of warn people. I mean, I feel like normies, 5 or 10 years from now, I mean, if, whether they read my book and understand it and do something about it or don't, I think the outcome is going to be very different between, people in the first bucket and people in the second bucket. You know what I mean?
Larry, Lawrence, Lepard.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you doing, Larry? Thank you so much for your time and welcome to the show.
Very nice to be with you, Keyvan.
Larry, I've been following you from pretty much the beginning, since you were active on Twitter, of course. And the first reason I really started appreciating you, because I don't want to, it sounds a little bit stigmatizing, but it's like, I thought, okay, you were like a gold bug, like a gold advocate.
Yeah, no, I was, for sure. Yeah, still am kind of.
Yeah. But I guess, I guess it's obvious. You're one of the very few gold advocates, or come from, as a sound money advocate, who can represent, more than fair, both sides, would it be Bitcoin and gold?
Yeah.
And, I don't want to regurgitate, because I've been listening to some other interviews you did, especially with Natalie Brunel. And I want to, thank you so much for your time again. I just want to use the time wisely, Can we just go straight to, or before we start can you just like a brief background, for my listeners?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is all laid out in the book I just wrote too, but basically, I'm an investment manager, a professional investment manager, and that's what I've done for my whole life. Started out right out of business school, more in the technology and venture capital area. And then I kind of, over time, morphed a little bit more into the sound money area. And I did that because when the GFC hit in 2008, I was just kind of shocked with what I saw. And so as a result of that, I realized that there was going to be a lot of monetary debasement in our future, and there has been. And so I kind of pivoted, and I still do some technology investing, but not the way I used to. And so now I'm much more focused. For a long time, I was focused only on gold and silver. And then as Bitcoin came along, I kind of began to understand it in 2013 and 14, and I got more involved in Bitcoin. And of course, as you know, now I'm in both. I mean, and there's a use case for each one. I mean, I don't like it when Bitcoiners shit on gold people, and I don't like when gold people shit on Bitcoiners. I think they both have merit. They're different, and gold is going to be massively outperformed by Bitcoin. However, it is less volatile than Bitcoin, and for some older people, that's a quality that they want to have. So there's a case for owning each one.
Fascinating. So before we continue with my question, I mean, first of all,
Sure.
Okay, your book is I just love your book, because
Thank you.
First of all, it comes from again, the big print. I got it from Amazon. The subtitle is "What Happened? The Big Print: What Happened to America and How Sound Money Will Fix It." I love it because it synthesizes. It's a new form of synthesizing, all the knowledge, the experience you have, It's and it's funny. It's as you know, I'm not the only one. When you describe that scene or that situation where
The opening, yeah,
exactly, and when,
you can see it for free on Amazon, so everyone knows what it is now. Yeah. I told Preston we got to keep it secret, but you know, it's pretty well out.
Oh my God, this is so amazing. Yeah, because I love the movie. I think it's a pretty well, well done movie.
Yeah.
Um, okay. I want to talk to you about gold.
Yeah.
Of course, you mentioned Safed Ammous. I mean, you cited also quoted Safed Ammous, or at least, his
Oh
content.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean
It's
my
like
book is built on some other great books, by the way.
exactly,
You know, what I tried to do was write a story that the average person would read. Because I found in giving out the Bitcoin standard to people, some people just don't take the time to read it. It's academic, and this is meant to be more of a thriller.
yeah, it is. It
How
is.
they've screwed us,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
I mean, the Bitcoin Standard is different insofar that, I mean, I enjoyed it also because
It's
it's
a
like,
brilliant book. It's a
yeah, it's like three
absolute
quarters of the
brilliant
book is
book.
all about the history of money. What is money? What's the
Yeah,
essence of money? How is it created? The whole
yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah.
and then at the end of it, like, it gets to Bitcoin. I mean,
And
basically,
by the way, Lynn's book is very similar. I mean, they're both fabulous books. They really are.
Mhm.
I think that if you hand a normie one of those books, the odds of them finishing it are relatively low. And not as a criticism of those books, just because of what a normie can absorb. And so what I tried to write is a book that any normie could read and kind of would get into and would say, oh, wow, this is interesting. And then, of course, once you've read my book, then it's like, oh, well, I want to learn more. Well, you should go read those books then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
And you know what? Another thing I love about how you formulate things, you don't, because you don't do any like BS about like, we don't have like to read between the lines. It's like
sure.
it becomes so obvious. How should I put it? I mean, the criminal element, the
Yeah, right.
non-accountability. Because
Yeah,
I did a
right. I
lot of
mean,
articles on the Bank of International Settlements.
yeah,
And I think that's why maybe Nick Szabo started following me because, and then
yeah.
I stopped, researching this thing. But the whole criminal immunity, it's like how is it possible? I mean, how do you have an explanation for yourself? How is it possible,
Well,
even though we have laws, we have this, we have jurisdiction, I mean, we have all
well, I
kinds.
mean, I think the book does a pretty good job of just laying out how they've just totally rigged the game, and that was part of the reason for writing it too. Was I've been around long enough to watch them rig it over the past 40 some odd years, and so I wanted to show everybody that this has been going on for a long time. I mean, it arguably even, go back to the founding of the Fed and the founding of the country. But let's take more modern history since we went off the gold standard in 71. And I just wanted to lay out all those facts because I think, I mean, the monetary system that we have is from a United States point of view, and it's true in the world too, but I write it from the US, it's an unfair system. It betrays the fair, what the Constitution tried to say, which is all citizens should be equal under law. And in fact, they're not because the Federal Reserve favors bankers and bankers can get bailed out. And it also, through manipulation of interest rates, low interest rate policy, it favors people who are wealthy because they can borrow cheap and then invest in things that yield a lot of money. And that's why the wealth inequality has gotten so bad. So, the goal, when I wrote the book was I just want to lay it out in really simple terms. So, because I think the average person, the average citizen of the world who doesn't know even like what the Federal Reserve is or what the monetary system is, all they know is their life's getting tougher, things cost more, their wages aren't going up, and things kind of suck, And that's led to a lot of political dysfunction, a lot of anger. And I wrote it because I watched the political conversation in the United States, and I felt like you guys are all ignoring the underlying problem, which is that the money is broken. And so, um, and so I thought, all right, well, if that's the case, then I've got to show how the money got broken. I've got to walk people through all the various steps and show and document the corruption. I mean, I hope I open some eyes. I mean, when you read, as you know, the first half of the book is quote unquote the problem, right? Which is the history of the corrupt monetary system and how we got this way. And then the second half of the book is the solution, which is, Bitcoin and to some lesser degree gold. And the first half of the book, I wanted to give as many concrete examples as I possibly could of just how corrupt this was. I mean, the wife of Morgan Stanley borrowing $220 million non-recourse in the middle of the GFC. I mean, what the hell? I mean, Phil Graham's wife serving on the board of Enron, and Phil Graham is loosening up the laws on derivatives and commodity contracts and speculation. Of course, all of which led to Enron imploding. but his wife was getting paid $1 million a year from Enron by serving as a director. I mean, the corruption is it's so vile and so large and so persistent that I'm hoping
Systemic,
that,
right?
yeah, and yeah, it really is. And what I'm hoping is that, if we can get the book to be read by enough people, and that's really my challenge right now. I mean, I feel like, it's doing great, and it's definitely doing great in the Bitcoin community, and I love that, and I appreciate that. All the Bitcoiners get it, but that's really not the target audience. I knew the Bitcoiners would like it. The target audience is average citizen, and because we got to get all the average citizens totally educated about what the hell's going on, so that they start to demand change and back politicians that want to do things like end the Federal Reserve and reform the system. So it's a little bit of an uphill battle. We've got to, I ask all people who buy the book and like the book to then try and recommend the book and pass it along. I mean, we've got to get a groundswell of opinion here if we want to have a chance of fixing this thing.
Larry, can I ask you something? I mean,
Sure.
take a quick question, psychologically, socially, culturally, whatever, or especially
Yeah.
you've got the year 2025. I mean, I read some, historical stuff too about bankers, that were like feathered and I don't know, hung. I mean, do you think what happened to us as a civilization, as a society?
Wow.
Is this are we being so brainwashed, so dumbed down that we
Yeah.
don't even experience the
Yeah.
systemic theft
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
being perpetrated by us?
centralization led to the people with a centralized power setting up a system that benefited them. And that's the other thing about the book. The book is, it's pessimistic about what's broken and why it's wrong and how, what might happen. That's the pessimism. The optimism side, Keyvan, is that, the internet and technology is going to save us. And the book says that. And I really strongly believe that. Whether I'd written the book or not, it would save us. And the reason it's going to save us is all those big centralized corrupt structures that lied to us for so many years, they're falling apart and they're losing their power. And so now, you and I can speak over, computers halfway around the world, and, you can compete with CNN, and, Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson compete with CNN, and people have other ways of getting information. And you can only lie to people for so long before they figure out, hey, I'm being lied to and I want to change this. So, yeah, I mean, I think, but it was a natural, the reason it's been the way it's been is that it was a natural outgrowth of centralized systems leading to corruption. And centralized systems are dangerous, especially depending upon who gets control at the top. I mean, the first example of that was, Germany, and, was a large centralized economy post World War One, and had a lot of, war making capability and a lot of industrial power. They could make tanks, they could make planes, they could make all kinds of stuff. And, they got taken over by a madman, and he started a war and it killed 45 million people. I mean, that's the danger of a centralized system. If somebody at the top isn't a good person, everybody else suffers. Which is why, in my view, we really have to we have to decentralize everything. It's the Bitcoin don't trust verify, so that we can all know what truth is, what the actual truth is. And the beautiful thing about the Bitcoin protocol is it's mathematical truth as it relates to money. And of course, until now, we really haven't had that. As Satoshi said, for fiat money to maintain value, you have to have trust in the controllers of that money, and breaches of that trust have been rather common. So, yeah, so but it's all good, right? I mean, we're going in the right direction. I wrote the book because I really want to just give it a shove. I want to go there faster, because we all have limited time frames, and I want to see my kids live in a world that's better than the one they're in right now. I feel like I grew up in a world in the 70s and 80s that was more fair and better and kinder than the world is today.
And different, yeah.
It was different, and I liked it. And it was different. I mean, we didn't have the technical things we have today. I mean, that's this kind of the technology we have today has really improved our world enormously. We didn't have that in the 60s and 70s and 80s, but we had a much flatter and fairer society, in my opinion. I mean, the wealth inequality now is just so insane.
Yeah.
So, and it's driving a lot of, it leads to a lot of bad stuff, as the book talks about.
Yeah, and people, I guess, they don't have the comprehension or the imagination even. I mean, what kind of symptoms and tentacles grew out of this? Because of the whatever you call it, broken money, or the systemic
Yeah.
systemic corruption, systemic,
Yeah, well, it led to wars in the Middle East. I mean, we spent $8 trillion in the Middle East. Military industrial complex convinced us that we had to do that. It led to the COVID thing where, they shut down all the good alternative therapies because the drug companies wanted to control the vaccines and what they consider to be the only therapeutic solution, which is wrong. I mean, it's led to so many things, and fiat money leads to bad actors winning because they figure out how to game the system,
Yeah.
and
And
that.
especially second, third, fourth order effects. I'm
Oh,
saying,
absolutely.
like,
I mean, I see it.
even
Like private equity is.
whatever, yeah, whatever
Yeah,
way you formulate it, it's always an understatement, actually. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying?
I mean, private equity has taken over all kinds of businesses. I dealt with it recently. I have two dogs. I had two dogs and now I have one. A private equity firm had bought out all the vets in the area, and my dog was very sick and was really basically doomed. But they managed to talk me into spending thousands and thousands of dollars to try and save the dog, he was really unsavable. But that's all because of the private equity incentives, to generate revenues for these businesses that they bought out. So it's just it's permeated society at all levels. I mean, look at the healthcare system. Look at the medical bankruptcies. Look at the fact that as a developed nation, the United States spends twice as much per capita on healthcare versus European countries, and yet we have worse outcomes. And for the first time in a long time, life expectancy in America is actually declining, which is kind of shocking. So, yeah, broken money leads to all kinds of other things being broken. I mean, and in fact, in my opinion, the most positive thing about fixing the money will be the way it make it much harder to pay for wars. I mean, if you look at the history, and the book lays this out, it's very hard for governments to pay for wars. Wars are extraordinarily destructive and expensive. And if the citizens said, if you went to the citizens and said, we're going to take away 2/3 of your income because we're going to have a war, the citizens would go, what the hell are you talking about? You're not going to do that. There'd be a revolt. But instead, what they do is they say, well, we're going to have a war. Oh, and by the way, we're going to print enough money to pay for it that we're going to take away 2/3 of your savings. You're just not going to notice it at first. And if we change that, if they can't do that, maybe they won't have the war to begin with, right? So, because I don't think the average citizen of the world wants to go kill other people. I mean, only psychopaths want to kill other people. So, it just. But we've got a system that's enabled, wars. Ron Paul said it. He said that it's no coincidence that the century of central banking, which is the 20th century, was also a century of war. So.
Yeah. As you know, I mean, you also quoted or cited G. Edward Griffin.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, I had him on my show actually a long time ago.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah, I love him. I mean, I read his book like, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. But
Me too. I just sent him a book as a thank you for
cool
for his contribution.
Oh my God, that would be a super combo conversation.
I'd love to. He's great.
Yeah. So, okay, let's just say, as you're also a fan, I know you're also friends with Jeff Booth. I also
Sure, yeah, I love Jeff. Yeah.
show, and I mean, what I love about Jeff Booth is like, I think people finally from the root up, they understand like what is the potential of a sound money, or in concrete case, Bitcoin.
Oh.
It's not only what has been stolen from us, at least in the last 100 years, or at least, from the beginning of the Federal Reserve in 1913, but what could have been, and I think Safin and Amus also talks about it, and with his new book was coming out on the gold standard. I mean, what do you think? I mean, is there like a scenario or like a picture you can paint for people? Like, it's not only what has been stolen from us, but what could have been.
Well, yeah, I mean, if just from a pure, productivity point of view, look at what technology has done. I mean, look at how, there used to be accountants, and spreadsheets. I mean, before before the PC came out, I was on Wall Street writing down numbers by hand and getting them typed out by a typist, and then having somebody shoot it and put it in a book. I mean, the improvements that technology has brought to the productivity and efficiency of the world are just unbelievable. I mean, you and I are talking, we're halfway around the world from each other. We're talking in real time. The quality is good. We can send it out immediately. We can tape it. We can, I mean, these kinds of things are they're stunning. I mean, you can get on Google or ChatGPT. You can get information on anything, the entire world's information base instantly accessed. I mean, I remember being younger and writing term papers. You had to go to the library, and access the periodical table of contents. And so, it's amazing to me what's happened in the productivity enhancements we've had as a result of technology. And yet we still have, poverty and wealth inequality. And I mean, we all should be working 20-hour work weeks because we've got so many more efficient ways of doing things. Now, part of that's because, work expands to, fill the time allotted, but it's also part of it's because the monetary system is stolen from us. And all that productivity benefit has gone up to the top 1%, that's kind of just raked it off. And so they're richer than Croesus, and the rest of us are just kind of working away. So yeah, I mean, I'm with Jeff. I mean, it's a broken system, and trying to run an inflation, a monetary system that by definition requires inflation, which is what Keynes' system does, over as an overlay to a technology world where everything is getting relentlessly cheaper and faster. It just doesn't work. I mean, something's got to give, and it's not going to be the technology. We keep inventing better and better technical solutions. So the monetary system is just going to have to blow up, and the book kind of says that. And by the way, that's a little bit scary to some people, and it's not necessarily something people want to contemplate, but it just is what it is. And so another part of the book, and the reason I wrote it was just to try and kind of warn people. I mean, I feel like normies, 5 or 10 years from now, I mean, if, whether they read my book and understand it and do something about it or don't, I think the outcome is going to be very different between, people in the first bucket and people in the second bucket. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, and I've been thinking like structurally, like on all levels of technology. It's not only like in whatever digital or computer or robotics, AI, whatever, but it's like I think what we've missed is or what has been stolen from us is the potential of other technological innovation.
Oh, absolutely.
Energy, transportation, the healing, whatever.
Oh, absolutely. Well, again, all the corruption and all the centralized systems. I mean, look, I mean, China is smart. They've got, top-down planning. I don't particularly like their politics, but, they're building 30 plus nuclear reactors. I mean, we should be doing that. Saylor points it out. I mean, every great leap forward in human productivity and human well-being has come as a result of figuring out ways to tap new energy. And nuclear energy is by far the most efficient and best form of energy. And yet, the U.S. is just stuck in the mud, probably because the oil and gas industry has a stranglehold on Congress and the laws and the regulations and everything else. I mean, we need a national project, a big project to put us back in the nuclear game, because without low cost energy, I mean, and where's, as Saylor points it out too, he said, he told me once, he said, Larry, don't worry. What's going to happen is all this AI is going to demand so much energy. The only way to get it, literally the only way to get it, is with nuclear power.
Wow.
So
Okay.
we will have nuclear power.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's right. But again, why couldn't we have a government that was enlightened enough to, instead of spending $8 trillion, taking over Iraq and then giving it back, or taking over Afghanistan and then giving it back, why couldn't they have spent that on developing a nuclear power, grid in the United States to, reduce the cost of everything? I mean, that would have been a much better use of resources. But, we've got the best government that money can buy, right? It's corrupt, and the people who are in power make a lot of money for being in power. And, they're heavily influenced by donations and lobbyists. And so, it's a broken system. But, I mean, on the bright side again, Kev, I mean, the system is breaking. The monetary system is breaking. And I think, even if people are going to get hit over the head with this issue, which, is kind of sad because it could be painful, but they're going to get hit over the head with the issue, and then we're going to fix it. And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we are about to reach a critical mass? I
really do. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm watching, this is a very, very big bubble, in my opinion, out there in the world, in financial assets, bonds and stocks. It seems to me to maybe have peaked, with Trump's actions as a disruptor. And it fits into the fourth turning time wave. I kind of think that, the issue of this fourth turning is what is money, as Breedlove has said. And I think it's going to get resolved in between now and 2035 at the outside, probably more likely between now and 2030. So we're in the 5 years where it really counts. And or a sailor said, we're in the steep part of the adoption curve. I mean, one of the things that I look at that's a real big canary or two canaries in the coal mine to me are, in spite of the stock market doing well, interest rates, being higher than they were, a lot of other things. So the, real rates are actually supposedly net positive if you believed in the inflation numbers. Gold and Bitcoin are at record levels. I mean, not today; they both backed off, but Bitcoin up to 106 and gold is approaching 3,000. I mean, to me, these are big, big warning signs that large amounts of capital in the world are starting to get concerned about what's coming. They know that the system is going to break, and then they know, especially if they've read my book, they know what the response is going to be, which is the title of the book. The big print. I mean, they've had two big prints. They had one in 2000, they had one in 2008. I'm sorry, really three. 2000 was kind of a small one. They didn't really, QE wasn't then. They dropped rates. Biggest print was 2008, the first one, and the second one was 2020. And there's a bigger one coming, in my opinion. They just have to. This is just this is math, so.
It's mind-boggling. I mean, to think about, correct me if I'm wrong, is it true that 40% of all existing dollars have been printed within?
Yeah, isn't that stunning? Yeah, COVID led to a 42% increase in M2 in the space of roughly 2 years. Mm-hmm. It is mind-boggling. I mean, think about that just from the standpoint of the average working stiff. You've got a factory job, you do the right thing, you work hard, you save your money, you put it away just a little bit every year, and over time you get to be 40 or 50, and you got a little nest egg built up. I don't know what it is, maybe 100,000, maybe $1 million if you're lucky, but you put away a lot of money, and then suddenly along comes the government, they print all this money, 40%, and they just took away 40% of your savings, which is really, it's worse than that because it's 40% of your life energy. I mean, you might, let's say you're 50, you spent 30 years building up that nest egg, and they just devalued it by 40%. They just stole it from you, really, is a simple way of putting it. And that's just wrong. It's just inherently wrong. And you might say, well, who got it? Well, the people who got it were the people who got bailed out, the purchasing, the PPP loans, I mean, that they forgave. I mean, it was just outrageous, some of the stuff they did, or the people who were able to borrow at 0% interest rates. I mean, because that's a game for the rich people. I mean, you and I can't borrow at 0% interest rates. If we go to a credit card company and leave a balance on there, they're going to charge us 25%. Yeah, right. So, it's just back to what I said in the very beginning of our conversation. It's just a very, very rigged game. And if we want to have a prayer of getting the game unrigged, we got to get everybody to understand it. And we got to get them to realize that the enemy is not, I don't know, Russia or China or whoever, whoever the warmongers say is the enemy. The enemy is actually the Federal Reserve. I mean, they're the ones who are printing the money. They're the ones who are devaluing our savings. They're the ones who are saying this is the way it has to be. And they're wrong. They're wrong. I mean, I think the book makes a compelling argument as to how and why they're wrong. And therefore, I hope people will read it. And then if they enjoy it, I hope they'll give it to their friends. And then I hope collectively we'll actually have a movement in this country similar to what Ron Paul had going on, which is to end the Federal Reserve. I mean, I think that's really the solution. We've got to go back to a form of sound money.
Yeah, Ron Paul is a legend. I mean, there's a picture inside the book with you and Ron Paul, and I hope it's finally his dream or his mission.
Yeah, well, he's pretty healthy. He's always a good athlete. He works out a lot. He's 90. I'm going to see him in a few weeks. My gut is he's got a good shot at another 10 years. And I think in the next 10 years it's going to get resolved. So hopefully he'll see the solution to the problem he's been talking about for so many years.
Yeah. And Larry, I mean, what is beyond outrageous or shocking, I don't know, criminal, is the way the government and trying to deceive the public about the inflation rate or the monetary replacement, or consumer price index is all,
Oh, it's all cooked. I mean, as you recall, I talk about that in the book and the shadow numbers. And look, I mean, basically the government is just a machine that lies. And, the government really doesn't do anything that we don't pay for. And, some say, well, we should have an anarchy. I disagree with that. I mean, I think if you go back to the intent of the original founding intent of the founding fathers, I think we need, my view is a government should be a fair referee. I want to have police officers, and I want to have courts, and I want to have rule of law. And that's about it. I mean, all the other stuff they do, I'm okay with not having any of that. And my gut is that if, and I think most civilized people would agree, I want a government because I want rules to be fair. I want a fair referee. I want fair courts. I want fair, police officers and FBI to put people in jail if they do bad shit, all that stuff. My gut is that that would probably cost us 10% of our income, and I'd pay that in a heartbeat. If somebody said, yeah, every year you got to write a check for 10% of your income, your wealth, whatever, fine, great. That's the price we pay for having laws. But all the other stuff they do, literally everything beyond that they do, I mean, most of it really wasn't even in the Constitution. And I honestly think, I mean, the national defense, I get that whole part, but I honestly think we're the bully in the world. We behaved in such an obnoxious way that, and created so many wars that leads other people to be armed. I mean, I think we could disarm the world. I just don't think the average citizen of the world wants to go to war. I just don't. I mean, which is not to say there won't from time to time be a country that's a really bad actor, but I think that in general, the balance of the countries can figure that out and collectively, done their citizens to shut down the bad country. So, yeah, we're going to have to see a different system here, but you know what, Keyvan? I mean, the good news is we're going to see one. I mean, the promise of Bitcoin, the promise of monetary reform, the promise of decentralization, the promise of technology, it's going to get a lot better. I mean, we're right in the heart of it right now because we've got these old people hanging on to the broken way where they got rich and they like that. And they're gonna. I mean, there's in a sense, in my view, there's kind of a certain amount of divine justice in the world.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think the Almighty was like, okay, this is really out of control. I got to send these people something to help them solve their problem, and that was Satoshi. And
Exactly. Yeah.
that's, Satoshi just, okay, guys, here's a piece of monetary technology. It completely levels the playing field, changes all the rules, and all those people who were winning before, and shouldn't have been winning, guess what? They're screwed.
Yeah.
And all you
I mean,
people who
so,
all you
yeah, it's so
all you people
beautiful.
who save and
Yeah.
play by the rules, guess what? You're going to benefit. That's a great thing, right?
Yeah. And I mean, just to reformulate what you just said, I mean, as you know, most Bitcoiners, always say, well, I always say, if it weren't for Bitcoin, I wouldn't have any hope. I mean, we also have
No, me
a
neither.
4-year-old daughter. I'm like, what kind of world is she going to grow up? It's
Yeah, no, me neither.
the last hope I have. And I don't have any hope, not even would it be Trump or Bukele.
No, no, no.
I just don't have hopes for politicians. I don't know. It just
Politicians are
structure.
politicians by definition. I mean,
Okay.
there are ones that are better than others, and so I support the ones that are better than others, but all of them have their own flaws. But I agree with you on the hope for your daughter. And to me, I mean, the one thing that was very encouraging, I've seen this from way before when Bitcoin was invented. I mean, back in 1998 was really when I started becoming aware of it. And, I didn't have a lot of hope either. And I was kind of hoping gold was going to bail me out of the problem. And, it just didn't work because they were able to control the gold market and have paper gold and, it's centralized and all the problems associated we all know. And so, when Bitcoin came along, and I was like, oh my God, we got this, this new technology, and they can't mess with it. And I got all these young Bitcoiners who read Safe's book and they're quoting von Mises to me. I'm like, oh my God, it's like the reinforcements have arrived. we, we got a chance of winning. I mean, because I'm not young anymore, and I got to tell you that it's been a terrible battle, and the other side has been winning, massively for a bunch of years. I mean, it's the rich have gotten much richer. Contillionaires
Yeah.
have done extraordinarily well. Yeah.
Why you touched upon gold? I mean, you said in one of the chapters where you talk about gold, like you could, talk about hours or write all kinds of books about the manipulation of gold. I mean, can you just quickly give an overview, like how bad is it, the manipulation of gold? I mean,
Yeah, I'll give you a quick overview. I mean, there are a lot of us in the industry who've watched it for years and years. We're pretty sure that there's, somewhere around 100 claims for every ounce of gold that really exists. There's a lot of paper gold and a lot of paper derivatives you can see. We saw specific actions. JP Morgan was fined, I don't know, $980 million. A couple of guys went to jail for manipulating the gold market. The BIS and others, there's all kinds of that were undisclosed have now been disclosed kind of paper trails of how they manipulated the gold market. I mean, Paul Volcker, and I talk about this in the book, Paul Volcker in his memoirs said that in the 70s, one of the mistakes they made was they let the price of gold get away from them, and they should have worked harder to manipulate it. I mean, this is a fact hidden in plain sight. I mean, the big one right now is a lot of people are aware of is that and Trump has said he's going to audit it, but I'm just not sure he really will. I'm not sure I believe him. But is there really all the gold that they say there is in Fort Knox? I mean, Eisenhower audited it in '53 because he was afraid that maybe the Dems had spent it, and apparently it was all there at that time. So, but they used a lot of gold to try and suppress the price during the 1960s with the London gold pool. It's entirely possible that they used some of that gold out of Fort Knox. I don't know, but I know Ron Paul told me he thinks it's not there. So. Yeah, so I mean, look, but again, back to the problem of gold, right? I mean,
Yeah.
at least with Bitcoin, you can say, here's my address, these are my coins, you can check it. You know what I mean? I mean,
Fully transparent. Yeah.
there's a transparency. I mean,
Hmm.
China's done it the other way. China only claims to have a couple thousand tons of gold. I think they have 20,000 tons of
Yeah.
gold. I think if you look at the imports into there, it had to go on somewhere. And so
They allegedly have some secret stash. Even I mean, even
I'm
up.
sure they do. I'm sure they
Whatever.
do. And there's little doubt in my mind that they're making a bet on, they can see the flaw in the fundamental, they can see the fundamental flaw in the Keynesian monetary system. They know we're going into a sovereign debt crisis, and they are making a bet on gold. There's no doubt in my mind about that, which is why, Jason Lowry is so important, and the guys in the Pentagon who were smart enough to understand this, we should leapfrog them and go to Bitcoin as the neutral reserve currency, not gold. Because ultimately Bitcoin will replace gold. It's digital gold and it's got better quality. So, but I say ultimately because, it's not an overnight process. This is years, perhaps arguably decades. But yeah, gold has been heavily, heavily manipulated. There's a site called GATA.org, run by a couple of guys who I've known for 20 years, Chris Powell and Bill Murphy. They're great guys. And there's so much information on there to support the manipulation case. It's just, it goes on and on.
Well,
And
gold
by
has
the way,
its.
there's some risk of that with Bitcoin too, but it's going to be harder. It's going to be a lot harder because Bitcoin's more volatile, it's more transparent. And to date, we haven't seen that much in the way of derivatives surrounding Bitcoin. Not nearly the level of gold. I mean, the silver market, I saw the statistic the other day. We mine about 800 million ounces of silver a year in the world. And I think roughly that volume trades on a daily basis in
Wow.
the COMEX and the silver markets. So we're trading a full day's worth, a full year's worth of production. They're trading that every day. Now, come on. I mean, that's just paper silver. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? That's not real silver. It's derivatives on silver.
Right.
And, they do it and they try and hold the price down for the obvious reasons. If the price goes up, they've got trouble.
Yeah.
So,
And Caitlin Long has been talking about this over and over.
oh yeah, Caitlin's great. I
Warning
mean,
about the rehypothecation.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
But with
She knows just.
Bitcoin, would you say it's impossible or nearly impossible or what?
No, it's not impossible. It's more difficult. It's riskier. But you can create paper anything. I mean, I can do a paper contract with you, but you've now when you do paper, you've introduced you've introduced risk that I will fail on my commitment. That I'm Lehman Brothers, and yeah, you did a contract with me, but I'm bankrupt, so I can't fulfill the contract. So. But yeah, and I mean, Caitlin has told me she thinks that there's a chance that, one of the big banks will do some paper gold and rehypothecate it and use leverage and everything else, and they'll get blown up, as a result of it. And it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the problem is that's in Wall Street's DNA. I mean,
Hmm.
Wall Street and this is in all the bankers' DNA really is, and this is where it all started. And my book talks about this. You go back far enough, is it? What they realized is just the more you create debt and the more leveraged you get, the higher your net income, assuming everything's going in the right direction. But as you and I both know, leverage cuts both ways. And if things don't go in the right direction, suddenly you're bankrupt. Which, if you've got the Federal Reserve to bail you out, well, okay, you're good.
Hmm.
But, or the BIS or some combination of all the central banks. But the fact of the matter is that therein lies the problem, because that bailing you out, quote unquote, is printing more money to dilute the value of every existing unit, and it's really a theft from everybody who's saved.
Yeah.
So it's just wrong. It's amazing to me. It's pretty simple. This isn't complicated, and it's just fundamentally wrong. And excuse me, and yet the central bankers and academics and Keynesians and all these people with fancy degrees and PhDs have convinced the world that this is absolutely how it has to be, and that any other thing would lead to the Great Depression. And that, if we don't have 2% inflation, we're gonna have depression. And it's just total horseshit. It's complete, utter total horseshit. It serves their interests.
Yeah, it's
They get richer.
indoctrination.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, 2%, 1%. Who
Yeah.
says
Well, and recently, Jason Furman was arguing and Krugman were arguing for 3%. I mean, it's just, and the MMT people, they argue for even higher. I mean, it's just, look, I mean, money was designed to be a unit of account, a standard of measure. And, it's like trying to build a house with a ruler that's changing in length. You're not going to have a very sturdy house because you're not building a financial system built on a form of money that is constantly being diluted is a shaky financial system by definition.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, let's go back just quickly to gold. I mean, it has its role, its functions, it fulfilled its role, whatever, with all the advantages and disadvantages, pro and contra.
Yeah, for thousands of years, it's done the job. I mean, in spite of the fact that it's been manipulated, it's still more or less held its own in terms of, protecting against inflation. From 71 to present, I kind of estimate inflation has averaged out around 8%. And coincidentally, the price of gold in that same time frame has gone up about 8%. So, you haven't gotten rich holding gold, but you've not gotten poor. I mean, a $71, it buys, a fraction of, of what, today's dollar buys a fraction of what a $71 bought, right? So.
Yeah. And, Safed Namuz, I mean, in his book, Bitcoin Standard, where he says, the only thing like structurally or as a monetary system, maybe, and the probability he said, is like so low or impossible, is, if they would come up with the logical or rational idea, to set up, what do you call a gold standard, but it wouldn't happen. But I mean, what's your realistic assessment of this? Would they think about,
yeah, so I mean, I think it's the wrong way to go because I think gold is fundamentally flawed. But, given the history of the world and given that 8 billion people know that gold is money and given that China and Russia and others are betting on gold, if we have a monetary event and a collapse in the sovereign debt markets, which I kind of feel like we're on the cusp of, I can't guarantee it's going to happen, but it feels like we're going that way. If we have that, I think it's a high probability that the powers that be at most of the governments of the world are not smart enough or advanced enough or forward thinking enough to say, oh, let's reset it to Bitcoin. Okay. Although I have to say, this SBR, I mean, they're starting to, obviously it's now part of the conversation. I mean, 2 years ago, Trump hated Bitcoin. It wasn't even part of the conversation. So we're now at the stage where it's part of the conversation, but still, I think if all the currencies of the world collapse tomorrow, I think the majority of the countries would try and go back to some form of a gold standard. They're just not ready to go to a Bitcoin standard. But then over time, and by the way, I mean, the price of gold would go up a lot in dollar terms. I mean, obviously almost infinitely, maybe the dollar would fail. And by the way, the price of Bitcoin would go up a lot too, because Bitcoin is just the next generation of gold. I mean, I've said, and I think the right way to look at this is that gold is analog sound money and Bitcoin is digital sound money. And we're moving towards a digital world. And so, eventually analog sound money won't be as, needed or as valuable. It'll always have some value because it's nice looking in jewelry and so on and so forth. But I think it will ultimately be demonetized by Bitcoin.
Yeah. And what is so fascinating every time I think about it is, I mean, as you know, the absolute scarcity of Bitcoin. I mean, it's never been done in human history. I mean, we have a money that is absolute scarcity of 21 million, where with mathematical precision, you know exactly when the last Bitcoin going to be mined in the year 2001.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the average human mind just can't wrap its head around this because this has never existed before. And so very much probably in the same way, imagine you found somebody in 1776 and said, hey, look at that. That's an airplane. There are people in it and they're going from point A to point B. And their mind would have just been blown like, what the fuck is that? Man can't fly. But, but we're flying, right? I mean, this is just, it's just a new thing. It's, people think I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm not. I mean, through millennia, we've had money that dilutes, even gold dilutes. I mean, we add 1.7% to the supply of above ground gold every year. So in 50 plus years, we'll have twice as much gold. We're mining it all the time. So, this is something, it's a form of money that does not dilute, which is why, Saylor rightly concludes it's going up forever, Laura, you know, in fiat terms. I mean, eventually, a better way of saying is not it's going up forever, but more as productivity and efficiencies increase and technology comes to bear,
Yeah.
its purchasing power
Hmm.
will be going up forever because, you'll be able to save money in this currency knowing that it will have more purchasing power in the future than today. And that just takes the world and shifts it right on its head
Yeah.
because, right now everyone thinks they gotta buy real estate. I love that meme that shows the guy, me thinking I'm good at real estate, and it's a kid with a basketball, and the guy holding him up, his name is inflation. And, right, the meme I'm talking about, right? And so, yeah, when you've got inflation, you buy real estate. Yeah, it looks like you're a genius because the value of your real estate is going to go up and blah, blah, blah. So, so real estate's not going to be, it's going to be a place you live. It won't be a go-to place to store value the way it is today. And so that premium will come out of it. So a lot of things will change, but probably the most positive one in my view is that people will be able to know that the product of their work will grow over time, and we'll have an entire shift from me, consume, 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 get as much as you can as fast as you can because things are losing value to, gosh, I'm going to sock away my nickels and I know that it'll be worth more in the future. Maybe I don't need that extra thingamajig. And, I mean, to put it in terms of, my peer group, I mean, I think one of the saddest things I've seen in my peer group is that people will be in the 60s or 70s, maybe even have some decent amount of money by most people's standards. And they're thinking to themselves, can I afford to retire? Because they really don't know how fast their money will lose value. And I know in my father's case, he retired with what most people would have said, well, he's fine. He's got enough money. And yet by the time he passed, it wasn't really that much money anymore, and that's just because the money's always losing value. Whereas if, in this world, I think in the new world, in the Bitcoin world, when you get to a certain level, you'll know that your money is going to continue to increase in value. And so if you take a few percent off every year to pay your bills, you'll never outrun your money, which is a really nice thing. I mean, I know people who cannot retire, even though you would think they could retire if you
Wow.
looked at the numbers.
Wow. This is so shocking. God.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a mess. It's a huge mess. It's beyond.
It really is a mess. And that's the sad part. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to be a doom purveyor, but
No, but what we would
you
really do
can't, if you
without
look at it,
Bitcoin
if
is
you look
very.
at it logically, you can't help but think it's a mess. And I think, and maybe that's why the book will ultimately resonate because I mean, I think I do feel like if I look at America in general, I do feel like there's just a big part of America that's like, what the hell is going on? This is just not right. I mean, the American dream's kind of dying. I mean, the dream was always that each generation would have a better lifestyle than their parents. Things would get better and better. And my kids are doing fine. They all have really good jobs. They're making decent money for their age, but they can't think about buying any real estate. I mean, it's insane. I mean, they're even having a hard time saving in Bitcoin, but I'm forcing them to. So, but and that's just not right. I mean, that's not the way it should be. So
Yeah. It's truly shameful, to be honest with you. It's truly shameful. But
it is.
at the end of the day, to wrap this up, I mean, when I'm trying to, talk about the potential of Bitcoin, like realistically, even, it sounds like more. I don't know why. Maybe that's why I want to ask you. Maybe give you a chance for my listeners or for people out there to because I know it's real. It's I mean, it can go by orders of magnitude of speed.
Oh
With
yeah,
technological, spiritual evolution, social
all
evolution.
of it.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
It's
but
a
it's
big,
hard.
deep rabbit hole, and it takes a long time for people to get there. And
Mhm.
you read the book, so you understand. I mean, I try and walk them in from the very beginning level where they don't know anything about it, and I try and point out the skepticism. And I spent a lot of time on the crypto versus Bitcoin thing because guys like Sam Bankman-Fried and all the crypto guys really hurt us a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got a better monetary technology, and they've got a gambling casino. And a lot of people I talk to, oh, I don't know, I'm not going to touch that stuff. There's a bunch of sleazeballs over there, and they're right. They're absolutely right. And I'm like, yes, that's correct. However, Bitcoin is not crypto. Bitcoin's a different thing. It's an invention that's unique and different and honest. And crypto is, by its very definition, dishonest. And so you have to make that separation. But the book does that. I mean, it's, all I can say, and obviously this is self-interested, but it's surprising. Keyvan, you really don't make much on a book. So I'm making like a buck or two a book, but all I can really say, if we want to change the world, I mean, you got to buy the book, right? We've got to get people,
Definitely.
I
Yeah.
think I tried to write, at least from my point of view, for me, and whether it works or not, who knows? But I wrote the very best possible book I could to try and help an average citizen understand why they're getting screwed, what they have to do about it, and then at a broader level, societally, how we can make things fairer for everybody. Left, right, pink, red, blue, all of it. Middle. I mean, it's not a political book, except insofar it's about the politics of money. And the monetary system has been hijacked by rich people and the government, and they have played it like a fiddle, and that's why they're so silly rich. And the solution is not what AOC says. It's not to tax them. The solution is to make the system fair again, to
Mhm.
level out the playing field, to get the referee to be in the game.
Yeah.
And what we got right here with Bitcoin, what we got is a mathematical referee that can't be messed around with. And that, as you point out, the fact that it will never ever be more than 21 million of these, that's an enormously important fact. And people got to get their head around it. I mean, it's gonna melt faces. I mean, did you get to the part of the book where I talked about how networks and how much value is accrued in networks? Wasn't that amazing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I read
mean,
your book, by the way, more than once, but some of the
yeah.
chapters, five.
Wow, it's very kind of you.
No,
I mean,
because it's not only thrilling. As I was reading, it was like, God, this would make a beautiful factual evidence documentary, even, I mean,
whatever. I
who
mean,
knows,
look,
who
I'm
knows?
all for anything to spread the word. That's what I'm all about, spreading the word. But let me just tell the listeners here what's in there, because this is a treat. I think they'll find. And honestly, this is one of those things that kind of popped into my head as I was writing the book. And I was like, okay, well, this is a network, and let's look at how these network-based businesses have done. And so I've been a traditional investor for, I don't know, 40 odd years. And, a really good company maybe would go up in value a couple hundred times, I mean, from inception to its top. But, like General Motors, for example, went public in 1916, and 1960 it was up like 400%. Okay, great. It's a good investment. But first of all, that's, 50 years. I went and I looked at all these networking businesses like Amazon and Google and Facebook, and Amazon's up 218,000%. Okay, Google's up 9,000%. Facebook's up like 2,000%. This is in 20 years, because remember, pre 2020, or I mean pre 2000, there really wasn't much internet. I mean, the internet, I was involved in 95 to 2000. It was just getting started. In 2000, about half the country had internet, and of course then it took off. But so in 25 years, you've got businesses that have been up thousands and thousands of percent. And that's because of Metcalfe's law, which says that the value of a network grows at the square or an exponent of the underlying growth of users. And it's just different. And so I wasn't taught network and business investing in business school. There was nothing like this. And I missed those businesses because every time I looked at them, they were overpriced. I looked at the value compared. I can't pay that. It's not making that much money. It's not a fair. But I was wrong. And because networks grow value, and they grow it faster, and they become incredibly defensible. It's what Saylor says. You want something that everybody needs, and it can't be stopped, and nobody understands. And that's what a network business is. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that, I mean, Bitcoin's going to 1 million, and then Bitcoin's going to 10 million, and then Bitcoin's going. I mean, this is per coin, and then it's going to high. I mean, and I don't think the average person can get their head around that. I talk to people, a lot of people, who say, "Well, yeah, I get it, Larry, but you bought it at 10,000, and I'm asked to pay 100,000." I'm like, "Well, yeah, that's true, but let's flip that argument on its head. Let's say that the world financial system is the Titanic, which I think it is. That may be a little extreme, but and then let's go from there and say, all right, so let's say that Bitcoin is a seat in the lifeboat. All right. Well, I paid 10,000 for my first seat, and I paid as much as 50 or 60,000 for seats, but I haven't paid 100 yet. But and now it's 80 or 90 or 100 to you. Do you want the seat or not? I mean, yeah, I got in earlier. The seats were cheaper. I get it, but if the Titanic's going to sink and you're going to die, with the existing financial system, and this is the alternative, you don't care if you pay 50 or 70 or 90 or 100. You don't care if you pay 200. I mean, the thing's going to 20 million a coin someday. So, all I know is I'm very comfortable just, whenever I have free cash that I know I want to deploy for a long-term investment, I don't think there's any more asymmetric bet than Bitcoin. So I'm very comfortable buying it here.
It's
So
extremely difficult for people. I mean, I've
it
been
is. It's
dealing with
hard.
Bitcoin since 2007. It took me 1 to 2 years until I understood the concept, the essence of Bitcoin.
Yes.
Really like the power of Bitcoin. And I'm like, people have a hard. I mean, would it be 500 trillion or a quadrillion, like total wealth that can be
Yeah.
sucked in? I mean, it's
Yeah. There's not. That's another great chart in the
yeah.
book. I love Jesse Meyer's chart. There's 900 trillion of wealth in the world. 2 trillion in Bitcoin. So it's a little over 0.2% of all the wealth in the world. I mean, Bitcoin could go up 10x, which would mean each coin would be worth $1 million versus 100,000 today, just under 100. I mean, it'd still only be 2% of all the assets in the world. And this is the best asset, the most pristine, fastest growing, highest performing asset in the world today, ever in the financial world ever. So I don't know. I mean, you might want to get some, just in case it catches on, right? As Hal said. So yeah, I think all we can do is try our very best to help those around us to see it and understand it. And my contribution was the book, and like everybody else will, hopefully, make their own contribution. And I think, that I know in my case, I have had some cases where I did get people into it at 5 or 10 or 20,000. They're very grateful now that I pounded the table and they did it. And I think in 10 years, there'll be people, it'll be at 1 million or 2 million a coin, and there'll be people who bought it at 100,000. They'll say, "Oh my God, thank God I did that. I'm really glad I did it. It was a good investment."
Exactly. Because it doesn't matter. It will always forever exponentially grow in purchasing power. It is
Exactly. No,
and
that's the
we,
point. I mean,
yeah.
albeit admittedly with volatility. I mean, the condition I always make, and we have to. I think it's incumbent upon all of us in the space to tell a newbie and a new buyer that you have to be prepared to have it go down 50%. and no, I mean, the only time I've ever seen anyone get hurt in Bitcoin is when they chased a new price high. It went down 50 or 60 or 70%, and they said to themselves, "Oh my God, I screwed up. I'm out of here." Right? I mean, that's a way to get hurt. And so to just say, "Hey, it's a one-way ticket, you got to buy it and hold it forever," that's fine, but you're not doing them a service if you don't explain to them the volatility and the need to be stoic about hodling through the volatility. And in fact, in my case, in several of these drawdowns, I mean, I bought a lot more when it got drawn down because I was like, now it's cheap,
Yeah. Yeah. It just, I don't know. Yeah. Once it makes click or the aha moment comes,
Yeah.
I think people are just going to start
Well,
accumulating.
that's the thing. I mean, the other thing I try and do is I try to get people, look, hey, can you afford to lose 1% of your net worth? Of course you can. So what's your net worth? Well, okay, take 1% of that, buy something, get started. Because once they get started, then they got skin in the game. Then they're a little intrigued. Then they start reading the books. Then it starts working. And suddenly 1%, well, maybe I need more than 1%. Maybe I need 5 or 10. And then you get to be like you and me, where, basically you're all Bitcoin. I mean, I'm not, because I've still got some gold, but the gold as a percentage has gone down a lot because Bitcoin's gone up so much faster than gold. And I haven't really sold any gold, but with new capital, I mean, when I get paid and I have excess savings, I don't buy gold. I buy Bitcoin.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of gold, to
Yeah,
begin with,
sure.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, I really loved our conversation, Larry.
thank you.
Where can people find you? First of all, I can't recommend this book enough. I mean, don't wait for a Christmas or a birthday party. You should have bought it
That's very
yesterday. I'm
kind.
telling my people because it's really one of the classics now. Of course, next to all the other,
There'll be a lot of other good books. It's not the only one, but I think it's probably the best book as an introduction to
yeah,
Bitcoin system.
yeah,
I hope I can fill that role there.
definitely.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Lawrence Lepard on Twitter. I make a lot of noise there. If you go to my website, it's ema2.com.
Mhm.
I'm a partner in something called the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund, which is a fund run by myself, James Lavish, David Foley, and others. It was up 61% last year. does a mixture of actually the coins, but also companies like MicroStrategy, miners, etc. You know, and it's kind of a diversified approach to having Bitcoin exposure and not above and beyond the coin. So and actually that fund is raising money right now. It's a $200,000 minimum for qualified investors. So yeah, I mean, I'm out there in a lot of places, and I go to the shows. I mean, anyone who bought the book and wants me to sign, there'll be a website up eventually, and there'll be a way to purchase a signed book if you really want that. But the easier way probably would be just to go to a show and you know, bump into me and tell me to sign it, and I'll do it. And so I'll tell you the show schedule. I'm going to be at BitBlock Boom in Dallas. I'm going to be at Mining Disrupt later this month. I'm going to be at the Las Vegas, you know, the big Bitcoin conference. And then I'm going to be Cheat Code up in Bedford later this spring.
Awesome.
I guess April. Yeah. And then I'm going to be at Prague, Bitcoin Prague.
Well, we might see each other. Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll meet you
soon.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll meet you at one of those. And then after that, it gets fuzzy. And honestly, at some point in time, I'm not going to be doing, I mean, I'm doing all this right now because of the book launch. I'm trying to promote the book, trying to push the book, trying to spread the word. But you know, my wife is pretty, you know, pissed off that I spent so much time and effort on the book, and she wants to do some other stuff. So after probably about a year into the book and it's off and launched, I probably won't be doing as many of these shows and doing as much of this stuff. But you know, that's a little ways out. So
well, it gets exhausting. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Larry. And,
thank you. Really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And any final remarks?
Oh, just look, just you know, obviously I am self-interested, but really self-interested in terms of the world. I mean, you know, just buy the book. It'll help you. I think it'll help you. I mean, if you're a Bitcoiner and you've got some friends that aren't, I think I just gave you a really good weapon. Because I think if people read it, you know, they're gonna have a higher probability of getting it. You know, and people get it at different stages. I mean, I had a lot of really skeptical gold investors in my fund who were very angry or didn't get it or whatever. And I've converted many, many, many of them. I mean, it's a process of just chipping away at their objections and increasing their knowledge so that they, you know, feel comfortable that, you know, this isn't just some magic internet money scam, you know, like Sam Bankman-Fried, you know.
Yeah, but
it takes time. I mean, it takes time. You can't, I mean, some people get it instantly, like, oh yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But most people don't, and understandably so. I mean, you know, being skeptical about your money, that's a good trait. I mean, there are lots of ways to lose money in this world, and there are lots of scams in this world.
Exactly.
And one has to be careful, you know.
Yeah. There's actually just to wrap it up. There's a quote. I mean, I can't find it now. Okay, it doesn't matter. Where you talk to one of your gold friends or gold bug friends, and he's like totally shifted from gold to 100% to Bitcoin.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Listed all the reasons, you know why.
Yeah, well, and what he said was really great. He said, you know, Larry, here's the problem. He said, we've been fighting this gold battle for so long, and they keep screwing us because they got all this paper gold. He says, we got these crazy Bitcoiners over there, and they got these really sharp spears and torches, and they're charging the castle. I'm going to go join them because I want to win. And I mean, this is a guy, I'm not going to disclose his name, but this is a guy who quit his job in 2000. He was a fund manager in tech, right at the top, told his boss it was a bubble, got out, took all his money, and bought gold at $300, okay? Gold went from 300 to 18 or 1900 in 2011. Then it came back down into the 13, 14 area. But somewhere along there, he got knowledgeable about Bitcoin. And somewhere in the 15, 16, 17, 18 timeframe, he took all that gold profit that he had from putting everything in, and he put it into Bitcoin. And this was when Bitcoin, back when 15, 16, 17, it was like, you know, well, there was the bubble in 17. But in general, you could buy Bitcoin back then for 5 or 10, right? So, you know, he made two really, really smart trades. He got gold on the first wave, and then he converted gold into Bitcoin on the second wave. And he's doing just fine.
What a unique case. Oh, I love this. I love these stories.
Yeah, it's good stuff, right?
Wow. Well, Larry, thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon in person.
Yeah, well, I'll meet you. So Prague, or are you going to Bedford, or?
Probably Prague, yeah, because I'm in Austria, so it's much closer. So.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll be there for the whole thing in Prague. So let's get together and have a meal there.
Awesome.
That's great. Thank you very much. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.